Hi folks, you're with Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast. In this essay, I'd like to talk about the broader issues around population decline, low birth rates, mass migration supposedly making up for the declining birth rate, and does a declining population equate to or guarantee or strongly suggest economic collapse or economic decline. Now, the demographers that comment on this, I know the talking heads and the supposed expert class, they're all a captured class. They're all captured by the globalist propaganda machine. So none of them are giving views and evidence or proving anything to do with birth rate and population decline. They're not proving it; they're asserting it and claiming it, but they're not even attempting to prove it. And also, when they're tackled on, well, what are the causes of Western or even population decline in other areas? For example, South Korea has a declining birth rate, and they're not white Western. So Japan has a declining birth rate. They're not white Western. So when these demographers, these supposed or alleged experts are tackled on this, why are population or birth rates declining and thus populations declining? Why is that so? They seem lost. They don't know. Well, it could be this and blah, 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 beep and a bop and a bop. They just don't seem to know. And I'm sure they're pretending not to know as the propaganda they're pushing is also just talking points that are handed to them. But what are the causes of Western population decline? And if lower birth rates, and is it a problem? And if so, why is it a problem? How is it a problem? Economic efficiency is something that is often talked about, and so productivity in the Western countries is declining. And why is it declining? Has it got anything to do with all those IQ 70 third world peasants that are being brought in? No, it's not that, you damn Nazi. It's something else. It's because of white supremacy. It's Hitler. So there's a lot of contradictions in the wider debate and discussion about this. But I believe that declining population or through lower birth rates is not a problem. And bear in mind that trends sort of can move. There have been times of high birth rates, times of lower birth rates, and times of, say, higher death rates, and so on and so forth, which all affect the population. But I don't think lower birth rates are a bad thing. I mean, if they go on forever and you become extinct or something, that's a problem. But that aside, what's wrong with economic efficiency? And the Japanese, I think, are certainly leading the way in many respects with their use of robots and automation and things like that. So robots bringing around, say in a retirement home, for example, robots bring around medication for patients, or bring around their food or their cups of tea or their so and so. And I've seen retirement villages where they have a certain level of service that every hour every patient gets checked on, and every hour something gets brought around. It can be something to eat, or a cup of tea, or it's the meals of the day, or coming around and say, would you like something to read? All that. But they're checked on, and there's a lot of service. But in order to give that service, they have to, as they see it, they have to employ very low cost labour. So they have to bring in illiterate peasants from the third world to do those jobs. Now, would and they are low cost labour, by the way. People can die, and these folks don't worry about it. And whatever, if they're not being directly supervised, they're spending all the time yakking away to their buddies in some third world shithole that they came from, Pakistan or somewhere. So the idea that they're quality employees that are committed to the care of the patients is nonsense. They're just cheap labour. So to what extent can robots fulfil some or part? I'd rather have a few good quality people, committed, maybe better paid, better trained, speak the language. I'd rather have a handful of those plus the robots, rather than masses of third world peasants doing that sort of work. So we need to consider efficiency in the wider scheme of things. It is declining population bad. How is it declining? In where is the, for example, I just saw this a few days ago. There's a retarded person who also has cerebral palsy, and they have to have a government house. They need 24-hour care. When they go out, they need a carer to go with them, and but due to the ideology of the time, it is that a person that are handicapped must lead a life that's as close to an equal outcome with a fully capable person. In order to deliver that capability, that support for equal outcomes of lifestyle and so on, they need a lot of resources that needed to be thrown at that person. How efficient is that? Is it humane and caring everything and feel gooding? Oh, sure. But is it an efficient sort of economy? To what extent do we have efficiency, and how do we then substitute that for birth rates or lack of them, and so on? So, for example, the population may be large because there are people over the age of 95 that are alive, or it may be that the population is lower because there are high infant mortality rate. So there's a whole lot of things to look at when you're looking at total population. And for example, there are many countries that say, well, the retirement and the pension program isn't sustainable because too many people are claiming it. Well, fine. So when you look at the arithmetic around pensions paying, so people retire at 65, then if you change the retirement age to 67, suddenly it is affordable. Suddenly it's not a problem anymore. If you change retirement age to 68, then it's easily affordable, and so on. Now, not everybody at 68 is capable of working. They're not fit enough, or they're handicapped, or they can only get around in a wheelchair or something. So those people can't. But there are a lot of people who are. A lot of people in 65 and over that are in pretty good condition and could easily work. But the only jobs we let them have in the Western economies, unless they're very well connected, the only jobs we give them is like I don't know, pushing a broom in a grocery store or something like that. No matter what they may, or qualifications they may or may not have. So it's hardly a productive use of expertise and qualifications and experience, credentials and so on. So efficiency of an economy is also a big issue. And I would argue the Western economies are horribly inefficient at the moment, given the mass of low IQ peasants that are being brought into the West. And on top of that, the globalists that are transforming the economy from a productivity-based economy to an ideological economy. And we see this with the expenditures of US aid, for example, that's being exposed by the Trump administration and Elon Musk, Act Blue, and all that money is being spent. Government money is the government involvement in the economy is massive, and the money is being spent all to pursue globalist purposes, which is creating a very inefficient economy. Coming back to the issue, though, specifically of do declining birth rates and declining population automatically mean Armageddon? Well, if they're gone forever, they would, because it would mean extinction. But that aside, I don't believe that declining population is a bad thing at all. How far it declines could be a debate, but I guess a few things we need to come to grips with. Firstly is the baby boom of the post-World War II era was absolutely unique in human history for two reasons. One is, the soldiers it was one of the first mass mobilization. World War I was one of the first mass mobilization wars. So families weren't together, people weren't procreating, and all that sort of stuff. So when the men came back from the war, married childhood sweethearts, came back to their wives, there was a lot of people were encouraged to procreate. Now, the purchasing power of the paycheck at the time was very high, or certainly relative to what it had been over time. So soldiers were coming back from the war, and they were getting married, or again coming back to the family situation. They were procreating. They had relatively high purchasing power. There was full employment. And there was also the idea of the suburban house. So there was the houses were very affordable for the people at the time, but also medical technology had really come forward, very substantially over that time, during World War II and leading up to it. So the infant mortality rate was probably as low as it had ever been. And you think of the combination of all those factors, and then you had a baby boom that was statistically very unusual in human history. So now that very unusual statistical event has been taken more or less by the globalists as the alleged baseline. So that's the baseline. That's what we have to have. And if we can't have that, it's Armageddon. Of course, that's bullshit. Really, if the birth rate is anywhere near, assuming it's like 2.1, that sort of thing, then it's about at replacement level, and that's fine. Does the population have to increase? Must it always be increasing? Well, no. I don't know, why it's supposed to be so. It's just asserted that we have to have population increase, otherwise end of the world. But no one explains why. None of these demographers can explain why. They go, oh, well, we have to have people to look after the retirement homes. We have to, or more old people are living longer, therefore we have to. And this, no, that's bullshit. Bullshit. So none of these demographers, again, who are global, the entire demographer class has been captured by the globalists. None of them can explain why. But what has happened? Why has the birth rate fallen below replacement? Particularly for the amount of time, because it's been something like 20 years now where it's been below replacement. That probably is interesting. And so let's have a look at that. So what's changed since the sort of the the high birth rates, because it came down fairly sharply there, sort of in the the early 70s. It so from 1947 to 1975 type thing, the birth rate was by historical standards at least pretty high, and of course the mortality rate at birth was quite low, due to improved medical care. Older people were living longer, that sort of. So they're all those things are true. Now, looking at the decline in birth rates, firstly, in that time, women started being encouraged to go to college. Not many women passed going to college. Not many of them met the standard of going to college. So what Western governments began to do was just lower the pass mark. Say, okay, well, all right, you can't make it to college on your own. So what we'll do is we'll just give you a free pass into senior high school and college. When I went to school, not many girls, like in the well-to-do areas, girls in higher proportion went to college and then into the public service or some undemanding job like that. But in the poorer areas, or in the less well-off areas, most girls left school at 15. Not very few went on to higher, but those girls who would have procreated, they were aggressively encouraged by governments to stay on at senior high school and then to go to university on all these bullshit sociology courses, which meant girls weren't finishing their education until they were 21, 22 years old. Now they were already past the prime get married, have children age that was part of that baby boom. So they now had quite high expectations. They'd been radicalized in university, and marriage is an evil institution, whereas prior to that, marriage was considered to be a natural place for women to go. You get married and procreate. That was considered the natural course of things. But now they're told, well, no, marriage is oppression. Your husband is a Nazi. He may even be Hitler, and all this sort of stuff. And that changed a lot of women's or young women's attitudes to marriage and procreation. Again, they passed that. 1920 was the prime marry procreate age group at that time, and so now girls are 22 before they're out of their education, and they've got to expect. I've got a college degree. And they were wanting to use their newfound, very artificial though it was all affirmative action anyway, their newfound erudition to be able to get these high paid, well paid, exciting, interesting jobs. Now, what most girls though wanted to do was what they perceived that the degree was. It wasn't a degree that's so they could pursue an interesting, rewarding career and something like that. And they didn't want to work hard or anything like that, or spend long hours at the office. They believed that those degrees would give them jobs in industries where there are a lot of high paid, high income earning men, which would then give them a better class of husband. That was primarily where they were going with that, and that was something that was unforeseen. And there the amount of women sort of I knew that got married young, but then they got a better job and they were around men wearing sharp suits and on high incomes, and they just didn't. They just left their husbands. No, I'm dealing with a higher class of man now, and that sort of thing. Not that it worked out for them, by the way. So if we look at that DEI affirmative action element that encouraged girls to stay on at school, even though they had no merit, there was no meritorious basis for them to stay on at school, and they never would have made it into university in a merit-only system, that artificially created a restriction, bottleneck of women available for, younger women available for marriage and procreation. Now, in addition to that, you had this large pool of women appearing, but they couldn't get jobs. So then affirmative action process had to be instituted into particularly the public service, and into bigger multinationals, and this idea of affirmative action, DEI, quotas for women getting employment and so on. And I remember, as a younger guy, probably I first came across this in mid to late 20s, I guess, particularly where I was going to the United States, where the amount of women who would just keep coming out, if only I had a dick, I'd be the CEO by now. And there's this angry, low IQ, radicalized, useless, pathetic, lazy woman who's insisting that had been radicalized to believe that she'd be the CEO of the company if only she was a man, And I was aghast at this, but it began to be a fairly widespread attitude, which again sort of shows or indicated a social development there that women said, well, why should I get married? If I get married, it's an oppressive Hitler institution to do that. So I'm going to stay in the workplace demanding that I get free handouts and free this and affirmative action that, which then further delayed the cohort of women who otherwise would have been again getting married and procreating. Now, similarly, the courses that were invented in university for women to do, lesbian dance theory and gender studies and goodness knows what, they were all radicalization courses that again encourage women to believe the patriarchy and misogyny and don't get married, whatever you do, which again had a big effect and slowed down procreation. So there's no sort of mystery here. Well, why did the birth rate decline? Oh, we don't know. It's just a huge mystery. No, it's not. Now, you add to this other factors that are probably more practical in nature, is that a lot of the girls got married through shotgun weddings. It was a generic term used for, she's dating some guy, she gets pregnant, and panic, we better get married. And it's considered what men did in that stage. Are you going to make an honest woman out of Jane that you've been copulating with and so on. So this was something that had a lot of shotgun weddings were going on, and some that worked out quite well, by the way. Some people I know that had shotgun weddings when I was finishing school, they're still married today and seem quite happy. So now, when you take the pill, contraceptives that came in, that eliminated the shotgun, or much of it anyway, not all of it, eliminated the shotgun wedding side of things. And that too was quite a large cohort. I wouldn't say there's a lot of it, but a decent amount of it. I mean, that could be the difference between 1.8 births and 2.2 births per woman. It could be have that much effect. So it's significant, the shotgun wedding. Now, the contraception changed that there were far fewer shotgun weddings, far fewer accidental procreations. Now, amongst the lower where there are generations of welfare recipients, for some reason contraceptives didn't seem to work so well for those people, but nonetheless, women are at work, staying work longer, education longer. Of course, there's going to be fewer births and fewer marriages, and thus fewer births. So I'm not surprised. Now, at the same time, rolling almost in unison of this was the increase in the cost of living. There was a time, within my lifetime, where the primary income earning, the guy who worked at the factory, he could support a wife and 2.5 children. Now it would be a very basic 3-bedroom house. It would be basic carport, basic motor vehicle, entry-level motor vehicle. It would be and in those days when all the clothes and everything were manufactured locally, you could do hand-me-down clothes. So there were a family of 3 or 4. The youngest would be getting all the hand-me-down clothes that had been worn previously by their older siblings, and the clothes would last that long. I remember people saying, "Oh, I bought this these trousers or whatever, these shirts or something." 10 years ago, when little Johnny was first born, now little Mikey, he's wearing the same, that type of stuff, and the clothes would last that long. And I've still got clothes that I bought, t-shirts and so on, that I bought when I was a teenager, and I haven't worn them every day since then. But some of them I dug out of I had them in storage. I'd forgotten they were there, and I put them through the washing machine. They're still as good as the day I bought them. Well, maybe not that good, but still eminently usable and serviceable, even though they're like a million years old now. So the structure of the cost of living, the cost of having children, and the cost of education, and all these sorts of things were very different then, and the costs were increasing. So somebody that worked at the factory down the road could afford to support a dependent wife and 2.5 children, and buy a house, and run a car, and have an annual vacation. Now that's impossible today. Absolutely, on an average wage, I'm talking. That's impossible today. You need 3 or 4 times the average wage just to be able to make ends meet, let alone buy property. So things have changed, from a cost point of view, quite radically. Is that the reason on its own? Well, no, but it is a significant reason why people, especially people that fancy themselves as independent means, the people that have intergenerational welfare dependency, they don't see the world the same way for obvious reasons. But for people that want to, pay their own way, be independent, or create their own life for themselves, then the cost of living is a big issue. And we can live in poverty and have children, or we can live sort of moderately and not have children. And people are opting, unsurprisingly, to not have children. And I'm not surprised by that decision. Is it a desirable decision necessarily? When you think, well, hundreds of years ago, people lived in poverty. That's not the same. Really, it's not the same. Those weren't the days of consumer societies. It was a very different society back then. So social changes in terms of mass consumerism and so on are also issues that have to be or should be considered. I suppose running in parallel again to all this is as consumerism takes a bigger role, and particularly the radicalization of children and students through the education system, is dispensing with religious instruction. Now, I'm not hugely in favour of forcing religious instruction on children. Should it be there as an option? I think it should. And the basic lessons from religious instruction, that he who's without sin cast the first stone, the Good Samaritan, those sorts of things. I think they're valid today as they were 1,000 years ago, or as they were when I was a kid. So it's a religious instruction has been, the leftists and the communists and the Marxists believe that ideological government, which is what Marxism is, cannot compete with religion. So religion has to be eradicated to make way for, or to clear the path for, Marxist ideology. And this is very much part. And so the Marxist ideologues, globalist ideologues, that use Marxism to clear the path for the globalist project, they're very much against religious instruction or religious teaching. And once you take that away, what sort of goes into the vacuum? Well, what goes into the vacuum is ideology and the relativism that comes with ideology. If you don't believe what I believe, you are Hitler. Therefore, you don't deserve legal rights. And those, so it's a lot of ramifications that come from once you take religion out of it, which is everybody, again, Good Samaritan and all that. So once you take that out of the mix, then into that vacuum come some things that aren't very desirable. The acceptance of certain cruelties and suspension of legal rights, and these, you're a Nazi, you don't have legal rights, that sort of stuff. That's what takes the place of religious instruction. For example, part of and I think this is one of the 10 Commandments, don't bear false witness, don't falsely accuse people of things. So these folks that run around saying everyone's a Nazi who they don't like, they're making they're bearing false witness, they're making a false accusation. And as the people that sort of dragged the January 6th defenders, you were trying to overturn the government, yeah, sure. That's the same thing. That's bearing false witness. So, but that once you take religious instruction out of things, or religious teaching out of the wider social curriculum, then into that vacuum, into that gap, comes unpleasant things, and that also has affected, I believe, the relations between the genders, and thus attitudes towards consumerism versus procreation and so on. So when you put all of these things together, it was hardly surprising that marriage and procreation has declined. I mean, it's no surprise at all. It's quite obvious. The globalist project, not that it was directly tending to do this, but the globalist project itself has militated very strongly against families, strongly against marriage, and strongly against procreation, and because of the other objectives they're pursuing. So this is probably the bigger issue. So they're unlikely to address the real causes of declining birth rates, because it affects really their project. But that isn't the whole story, as we can see in Japan, for example. They don't suffer the same malaise as the West. They don't have, radical lesbian black feminists running up and down the country. They don't have that, and they still have quite an honourable, certainly as I see it, social structure. And I've been there, a number of times, done business with them and so on. Why is the Japanese birth rate declining then? If it's not to do with globalization and feminists and this, that, and the next thing, Japanese society too has changed, and also the relationship between looking after elderly relatives and procreating. For example, if your elderly relatives need to be put in some sort of retirement home, that's quite expensive. So can you afford that and afford to support dependent children? Now, given the ancestor worship of those sort of cultures, you can see how that would be. Well, okay, well, if we're going to look after mum and dad in the retirement home, we can also have children. So there are those sort of considerations as well. Now, in South Korea, where the birth rates also decline, that has gone through sort of a feminist wave. Women there, and they do videos on this, and where why should I get married and have children? Why do I want to be a subordinate to some man? And it's better that I just don't just have boyfriends and don't get married and don't procreate. And there are there are groups of South Korean women that come on women's, vacation groups to Australia, for example, and they're quite brazen about it. Hey, these groups of young women, like, they've just finished college or something like that, so they're in their early 20s, and they come to Australia, or so they claim anyway. They come to Australia. Hey, I'm just here to have a good time and fuck Western guys. So that's hardly people that look like they're committed to marriage and procreation and continuing the lineage or something like that. So there are also changes around there. Now, then coming back to the low population or declining population thing. Now, again, and not that it goes on forever, but it can go on for quite. Britain, for example, could be a very efficient economy with a population of between 40 and 50 million. So what I would envisage happening if population is declining, you simply increase the merit, the rigor of education, and you increase robotisation, and you increase those sorts of things to make up for the declining population, so that the economy becomes much more efficient. People work more efficiently. There are more robots. There's more mechanization of production, and so on and so forth. And efficiencies are looked for and found, so that everyone can be very gainfully employed. But you just up the ante in terms of, again, quality of education, merit, rigor of education, and so better educate, as in rigorously educate, merit-based education. People produce more, they create more, they do it more efficiently, and that's a good thing. Importing IQ 70 peasants from the third world, that's not efficiency. So efficiency can more than make up for declining population. Now, there may be a stability point where, for example, in Britain's case, below 50 million may reduce the economic mass to a point where it goes into reverse. Above around 50 million, it's at maximum point of efficiency. And I'm using here Samuelson's sort of economic theory of elasticity at the point of maximum efficiency. But nonetheless, say I don't know what the number is, by the way, but say it's 50 million, then as the population declines towards 50 million, then there's no worries. But efficiency and increased efficiencies can more than make up for the declining population. So I would see that's the path to go on. But that's not the globalist path. The globalists are rejigging the world economy so that the total consumer mass is where the economic... So, they're looking at oligopoly and monopoly control of all the essentials of life, water and housing and food. All of that will be totally controlled by a small group of monopolists, medical care and the like. And therefore, total consumer mass is more important to them. Now, each person will be able to consume less, but the way the taxation system will work, it will be to fund the monopolists to ensure they deliver the services to the consumer mass. But so increasing population is what they need to create for them the most efficient number in mass consumer peasant type social structures. The serfs of the medieval era effectively will be recreated. So for them, that's the point of maximum efficiency. But for all the rest of us, it means a savage reduction in the quality of life and standard of living overall, and removal pretty much of all discretionary spending, again, to be replaced with total mass. So those are some of the issues, and that's my view on it. But does declining population mean Armageddon? Nothing of the sort. That's nonsense, and I reject it out of hand. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel. Thank you for listening.